Chapter 1. The Anatomy of a Failed State. The history of El Salvador is written in blood and broken promises. To understand the existence of CECOT, you must understand the vacuum that preceded it. For 30 years, the country was not governed by the Legislative Assembly, but by two acronyms, MS-13 and Barrio 18. These were not mere street gangs, they were a sophisticated, transnational insurgency. They controlled the movement of goods, the price of basic staples, and the very right to life. The gangs originated in the streets of Los Angeles, formed by refugees fleeing the Salvadoran Civil War in the 1980s. When the United States began mass deportations in the 1990s, it exported a hardened, California-bred criminal culture into a country with weak institutions and a traumatized population. The virus found a perfect host. By the early 2000s, the Maras had divided the country into a patchwork of invisible borders. Crossing the wrong street meant a death sentence. Successive governments attempted to solve the crisis through two failed methods. The first was mano dura, or iron fist, aggressive policing that only served to fill prisons, which the gangs then turned into their own command and control centers. The second was the infamous 2012 truce, where the government secretly negotiated with gang leaders to lower the murder rate in exchange for prison perks. This truce did nothing but legitimize the gangs as political actors and allow them to consolidate their power. By 2015, El Salvador saw a homicide rate of 103 per 100,000 inhabitants. It was the most violent place on earth not currently engaged in an active, conventional war. The state had effectively surrendered. Chapter 2. The 72-hour massacre and the state of exception. The breaking point arrived in March 2022. For years, there had been a fragile, unspoken understanding between the new administration of Nayib Bukele and the gang leadership. But on Friday, March 25, that understanding shattered. Over the course of 72 hours, the gangs launched a coordinated slaughter across the country. They killed indiscriminately bakers, street vendors, passengers on buses. 87 people were murdered in a weekend. It was a blatant display of force designed to show the government who truly held the keys to the country. The response was immediate and unprecedented. President Bukele requested, and the Legislative Assembly approved, a state of exception. It was supposed to last 30 days, it has been renewed every month for years. The decree stripped away the right to legal defense, extended the period of detention without charge, and allowed the government to intercept communications without a warrant. The military was deployed in war zones. Neighborhoods were encircled by thousands of troops. The war against gangs had begun. In the first year alone, over 65,000 people were arrested. The existing prison population doubled, then tripled. The government didn't just want to arrest the gangs. They wanted to erase them from the physical and social fabric of El Salvador. To do that, they needed a place where the sun never shines. They needed the terrorist confinement center. Chapter 3. CECOT, the Fortress of Silence. In the isolated municipality of Tecoluca, 45 miles southeast of San Salvador, the government broke ground on a massive scale. Built in just 7 months, the Centro de Confinamiento del Terrorismo, CECOT, was designed to be the ultimate destination for the top tier of the gang hierarchy. It is a sprawling complex of concrete and steel covering 410 acres, hidden in a valley and surrounded by heavy volcanic soil. The security architecture is tiered for total containment. The first layer is a perimeter wall of reinforced concrete, followed by electrified fences pulsing with 15,000 volts of electricity. 19 towers dominate the skyline, staffed by guards with high-caliber rifles. The prison is completely off the grid, with its own water wells and electrical generators, ensuring that no outside sabotage can compromise the containment. Inside, the complex is divided into 8 massive pavilions. Each pavilion is a self-contained ecosystem of misery. There are no communal dining halls. There are no classrooms. There are no windows to the outside world. The walls are thick enough to block all cellular signals. When an inmate enters CECOT, they enter a vacuum. The government's stated goal was clear. These men will never see a telephone, a woman, or a patch of grass ever again. They are to be buried alive in concrete. Chapter 4. Life inside the cage. The silence inside the housing pavilions of CECOT is not natural, it is enforced. Each pavilion contains rows of massive cells, approximately 1,000 square feet each, designed to hold up to 80 men. There are no individual cells for the general population of terrorists. They live in a state of constant, forced intimacy with their enemies and their peers. The geometry of the space is designed for maximum surveillance. Every inch of the cell is visible from the guard walkways above. Sleep is a luxury that the architecture denies. The beds are 4-story tiers of cold, galvanized steel. There are no mattresses. There are no pillows. The inmates lie directly on the metal, bone against steel. They are provided with a single thin sheet if they are lucky. The lights never turn off. High-intensity LED rays bathe the pavilion in a sterile, white glare 24 hours a day. This is a deliberate tactic of sleep deprivation and psychological disorientation. Without the transition from day to night, the concept of time begins to dissolve. The daily routine is a monotonous loop of survival. At 6 a.m., the count begins. Inmates must stand in rows, heads bowed, hands behind their backs. Any deviation from the prescribed posture results in immediate disciplinary action. Food is delivered through a small slot in the heavy steel mesh doors. It is a calculated caloric intake, a scoop of beans, a portion of rice, and a tortilla. There is no variety. There is no flavor. It is fuel for a body that has nowhere to go. Hygiene is a public act. 2 open toilets and 2 concrete wash basins serve 80 men. There are no partitions. There is no dignity. The smell of 40,000 unwashed bodies, human waste, and industrial disinfectant creates a permanent haze in the air. Because there are no windows, the tropical heat of Tekaluka is trapped inside the concrete slabs, turning the pavilions into ovens. The air is thick, humid, and stagnant. Chapter 5. The uniformity of the damned in CECOT. The individual is dead. Every inmate is stripped of their clothing upon arrival and issued the terrorist uniform, a pair of thin white cotton shorts. No shirt. No shoes. No socks. The removal of clothing serves 2 purposes. First, it makes it impossible to hide contraband or weapons. Second, it is a tool of humiliation. These were men who once wore expensive sneakers, heavy gold chains, and designer gear as symbols of their status. Now, they are reduced to identical figures of pale skin and bone. This lack of clothing reveals the ledger of their past lives, the tattoos. In the world of the Maras, tattoos were a biography. A tear beneath the eye for a murder committed, MS-13 inches or 18, emblazoned across the chest or forehead to show eternal loyalty. Gothic script marking the names of dead homeboys. In CECOT, these tattoos have become a permanent brand of guilt. There is no former member here. The ink is a life sentence. The guards, by contrast, are ghosts. They are never seen without their tactical gear and balaclavas. This anonymity is a security measure to protect them and their families from gang retaliation outside the walls, but inside, it creates a terrifying power dynamic. The inmates are completely exposed, while their captors are faceless entities of the state. There is no verbal communication allowed beyond commands. An inmate does not ask for water, he waits to be given it. He does not speak to his neighbor. He remains silent or risks the dark cells. Chapter 6. The Dark Cells, Punishment Within Punishment. For those who break the rigid rules of the pavilion, who fight, who attempt to communicate through hand signals, or who show even a spark of defiance, there is a place deeper within the complex. These are the isolation cells. While the main pavilions are flooded with light, the isolation cells are pits of total darkness. They are small, windowless concrete boxes with no furniture. An inmate is placed inside alone. There is no light, no sound, and no contact with any other human being for days or weeks at a time. The sensory deprivation is absolute. In the pitch black, the mind begins to hallucinate. The walls seem to close in. The government uses these cells to break the will of the gang leaders, the palabreros who once ordered massacres with a flick of a finger. In CECOT, their word, palabra, means nothing. They are reduced to scratching at the walls in total isolation. Many who emerge from the dark cells are never the same. Their cognitive functions are dulled, their spirits crushed. It is the ultimate reset button for the state's most defiant prisoners. Chapter 7. The Health Crisis Behind the Veil. The government of El Salvador maintains that the inmates are treated humanely, but the numbers tell a different story. Since the state of exception began, hundreds of deaths have been reported within the prison system. In CECOT, the lack of medical transparency is a wall as thick as the concrete perimeters. There is a small infirmary on site, but it is equipped only for the most basic trauma. Diseases like tuberculosis and skin infections spread like wildfire in the overcrowded, unventilated pavilions. Because the inmates are malnourished and under constant psychological stress, their immune systems are compromised. A simple infection can become a death sentence. Human rights observers are barred from the facility. The only images the world sees are those released by the government's highly polished communications office, videos of orderly rows of men, cinematic shots of the high-tech security center, and images of the president touring the facility. The reality of the sick and the dying is kept in the shadows. For the families of the incarcerated, the lack of health updates is a form of torture. They do not know if their loved ones are alive until a body is delivered to a local morgue, often with signs of trauma or severe emaciation. Chapter 8. The judicial black hole. The physical confinement of CECOT is mirrored by a legal vacuum that defies international norms. Under the state of exception, the presumption of innocence has been effectively deleted from the Salvadoran legal lexicon. When a suspect is brought to the gates of the terrorist confinement center, they enter a system where the burden of proof has shifted entirely. It is no longer the state's job to prove you are a criminal. It is your job to prove you are not, an impossible task from inside a steel cage with no access to a telephone. The trials themselves are a grim assembly line of justice. These are mass trials, where a single judge may preside over the cases of 500 to 1,000 defendants simultaneously. The proceedings are held via video link. The inmates remain inside the prison, staring at a small screen, while a masked judge in a secure location decides their fate. Defense attorneys, often overstretched public defenders, are given mere minutes to argue for hundreds of individuals. There is no opportunity to present character witnesses, no chance to cross-examine the anonymous, protected witnesses, whose testimony often forms the entire basis of the prosecution's case. The sentences handed down are staggering. New laws passed alongside the state of exception allow for sentences of 40 to 60 years just for the crime of belonging to a gang. You do not need to be linked to a specific murder or robbery. The mere existence of a tattoo or a name on a police database is enough to justify a half-century behind bars. For many in CECOT, the sentence is a mathematical death penalty. They are 20 years old, facing 60 years in a place with no sunlight. The math is simple. They will never leave CECOT in any state other than a body bag. Chapter 9. The technology of total control. CECOT is not just a prison, it is a high-tech laboratory for social control. The facility is equipped with an array of sensors and surveillance technology that makes physical escapes a statistical impossibility. The Intelligence Center within the prison is staffed 24/7 by elite units who monitor thousands of camera feeds. These cameras are equipped with facial recognition and movement analysis AI that can detect unusual patterns, a gathering of 3 or more inmates, a sudden movement, or a sign of physical distress, before a human guard even notices. Signal jamming is absolute. The prison is located in a geographic dead zone, but even so, the walls are lined with active jamming technology that neutralizes any rogue cellular or radio frequencies. This is a direct response to the failures of the old prison system, where gang leaders used smuggled smartphones to coordinate hits and manage drug shipments from their cells. In CECOT, the signal is dead. Furthermore, the facility uses biometric logging for every staff member and visitor. Every door is controlled remotely from a central command post. There are no physical keys that can be stolen or duplicated. The architecture utilizes man-traps, interlocking doors where the first must close and lock before the second can open. An inmate could theoretically overpower a guard and take his uniform, but he would still be trapped between 2 slabs of 3-inch steel, waiting for a remote operator to see his face on a screen. In CECOT, the machine is the warden. Chapter 10. The international fallout. The international community is paralyzed by the Bukele model. On one hand, human rights organizations like Amnesty International and Human Rights Watch have issued scathing reports. They document systemic torture, arbitrary detentions, and short-term enforced disappearances. They warn that El Salvador is sliding into a civilian dictatorship where the prison is the primary tool of political and social management. On the other hand, neighboring countries in Latin America are watching with envy. Politicians in Honduras, Ecuador, and even as far as Chile and Argentina are facing their own crime waves. For them, the images coming out of CECOT are not a warning, but a blueprint. Bukelism has become a potent political export. The idea is simple: suspend the rights of the few to secure the safety of the many. The United States finds itself in a diplomatic tightrope. While the State Department officially criticizes the erosion of democratic institutions and the lack of due process, they cannot ignore the results. Illegal migration from El Salvador to the U.S. border has dropped significantly as the country becomes safer. The root cause of migration, gang violence, is being addressed, albeit through methods that violate every Western legal tradition. This creates a moral hazard. If a dictator can solve a problem that democracy couldn't, which one will the people choose? CECOT is the physical argument that democracy is a luxury that a dying nation cannot afford. Chapter 11. The Secret Burials. One of the darkest rumors surrounding the war on gangs involves what happens to those who do not survive the conditions inside CECOT. Because the facility is closed to the press and independent monitors, the disposal of remains has become a subject of intense speculation and fear. Families have reported being notified of a relative's death months after the fact. In some cases, bodies are buried in common graves or paupers' cemeteries, without the family ever being allowed to identify the remains. This has led to accusations of the government hiding the true scale of the mortality rate within the prison. If an inmate dies of a preventable disease or as a result of a beating, the official cause is often listed as natural causes or respiratory failure. In CECOT, there is no ritual for the dead. There is no mourning. A prisoner who dies is simply a number that has been removed from the ledger. This erasure is the final stage of the state's strategy. They do not just want to imprison the gangs, they want to make it as if they never existed. The lack of death records and the secrecy surrounding the infirmaries suggest that CECOT is not just a confinement center, but a terminal destination. Chapter 12. The evolution of the guard. The men who hold the keys to CECOT are not ordinary prison wardens. They are a specialized hybrid of military, infantry and correctional officers, trained in containment psychology and urban warfare. Within the walls of the prison, the guards exist in a state of permanent mobilization. Their training emphasizes the total dehumanization of the inmate. They are taught that the men in the white shorts are not citizens, but biological threats to the Salvadoran state. This evolution of the guard has created a new military caste in El Salvador. These units live in barracks on site for weeks at a time, isolated from their own families to prevent contamination or intimidation by outside gang remnants. The psychological pressure on the guards is immense. They live in the same stifling heat, breathing the same recycled air, surrounded by thousands of men who, despite being shackled, possess a collective history of extreme violence. To maintain control, the guards use a system of collective punishment. If one inmate in a cell of 80 hides a piece of plastic or speaks back, the entire cell is denied food or forced to remain in a stress position for hours. This turns the inmates against one another, making the internal politics of the cell the guards' primary tool of control. The guards are the conductors of a symphony of tension, ensuring that the inmates are too busy surviving each other to ever contemplate a unified front against the staff. Chapter 13. The resistance from within. Despite the 15,000 volts and the snipers, human nature dictates that where there is absolute pressure, there is a search for a crack. Inside CECOT, the resistance is not physical, it is communicative. The gangs, particularly the MS-13, were pioneers of huilas, tiny, encrypted notes written on scraps of plastic or paper, swallowed and passed through the digestive tract. In the old prison system, huilas were the lifeblood of the organization. In CECOT, the state has attempted to eliminate the materials needed for huilas, but reports suggest that inmates have reverted to more primitive methods. They used wall tapping codes, rhythmic sequences beaten against the concrete that can travel through the structural steel of the building. They use sign language disguised as scratching or adjusting their shorts. The resistance also takes the form of hunger strikes, though these are rarely reported. In several pavilions, groups of inmates have attempted to refuse food as a protest against the lack of medical care. The response from the administration is swift and brutal: total isolation of the pavilion and the removal of the instigators to the dark cells. The state's goal is to ensure that no inmate feels they have any agency left. Even the act of refusing a bowl of beans is treated as an act of terrorism. Chapter 14. The Golden Cage, and the narrative of success. The government frequently brings invited journalists and foreign influencers to CECOT for curated tours. These tours are highly orchestrated. The visitors are shown the cleanest pavilions, the high-tech control room, and the inmates in their most submissive state. This has earned CECOT the nickname, the Golden Cage, in political circles, not because it is luxurious, but because it is the gold standard of authoritarian marketing. The narrative of success is built on a simple statistic: the homicide rate. By effectively disappearing 1% of the total population into the prison system, the government has achieved a peace that feels like a miracle to the average citizen. This success creates a moral silence. When people can finally walk to the store at 9 p.m. without being murdered, they are often willing to look away from the human rights violations happening in Tekaluca. The government exploits this trade-off. Their messaging is clear: you can have human rights for terrorists, or you can have the right to live. You cannot have both. This false binary has become the most successful political tool in modern Latin American history. CECOT is the physical proof that a country can be cleaned if the state is willing to be more ruthless than the criminals it fights. Chapter 15. The conclusion, the concrete silence. As the dust settles over the valley of Tecoluca, the reality of El Salvador remains a paradox that the rest of the world is still struggling to reconcile. On the outside, the change is undeniable. You can walk through the once notorious streets of Soyapango at midnight. You can see families eating in parks that were once used as dumping grounds for bodies. The extortion calls have stopped. The invisible borders have been erased. For the first time in 3 decades, El Salvador breathes. But the cost of that breath is measured in millions of tons of reinforced concrete and the silence of 40,000 men. CECOT is more than just a jail. It is a permanent storage facility for the human consequences of a failed century. It is the physical manifestation of a nation's collective decision to prioritize survival over the nuances of Western law. The government of Nayib Bukele has bet everything on the idea that you can solve a social disease through absolute containment. But history warns us that nothing is truly contained forever. Behind those 36-foot walls, a new kind of resentment is brewing. In the barrios, a generation of children is growing up in the shadow of disappeared fathers. And in the halls of power, a government has discovered that mass incarceration is a potent drug. The more you use it to maintain order, the more you need it to stay in power. Is CECOT a miracle or warning? Perhaps it is both. It is a miracle for the mother who no longer has to bury her son because of a gang initiation. It is a warning for a world that is increasingly tempted to trade its messy, complicated freedoms for the cold, efficient security of a cage. As the sun sets over the watchtowers of the terrorist confinement center, the lights click on, blinding, white, and eternal. They illuminate a place where time has stopped, where names have been replaced by numbers, and where the most dangerous jail in the world stands as a gray monument to the end of an era. The gangs are gone from the streets, but they are etched into the stone of Tecoluca. Whether this is a final victory or merely a long-term burial is a question that only the coming decades will answer. For now, there is only the humming of the electrified fence and the heavy, stagnant air of the pavilions. The war is over. The silence has begun.